Welcome to your Daily Dose of Theological German. We are on installment number 3 of this excerpt we've been working on that came out of Ziefle's Graded Reader, but the author who wrote it is Schlatter from his book, The Evangelist, John. So let's get to it. This presented itself already from the situation which had arisen through the baptismal preaching. You have a compound word here, and so this is preaching. And taufen, a verb, means to baptize, so this is probably referring to the preaching of John the Baptist and his baptismal message, something like that. There's a couple other things I want to look at here in this sentence. So the first thing I want to look at is this verb here, entstanden, which I translated as something like arise or something like that. If you've been doing German for a while, you'll know just because of where this is in the sentence that that is not the lexical form. That's not infinitive. That has to be a participle. However, before you get to that, if you're still relatively new in your German and you're having to look up a lot of words, and you might have to look this one up because although you might feel like, is it related to somehow standing? Yes, it is, but you've got this prefix on here, right? So it's not just a simple verb. And so you might want to look it up, and you might try to go look up entstanden in the dictionary because that kind of looks like an infinitive verb, and you'll discover, oh wait, that doesn't exist. So how am I going to find this thing? Clearly, there's some other verb here which the form has changed, and it's because it's a participle that it looks the way that it does. How are you going to find it? Well, you're going to take off that ent, and you're just going to look up the second part of it because that's going to give you something simpler. And if you look that up in your dictionary, you'll notice that there is an entry for stand. First, there's a noun, which isn't necessarily going to help you, although often when you look through an entry like that, you'll see verbal instances as well because they show you where it's coming from. But if you look here, stand, you see this is a verb, and this is actually listed because oftentimes where there's an irregular verb, which is what this is, your past participle or a past tense will be listed there, and it will tell you what the lexical form is. So it says see stehen, and so that's actually what you want to go and look up. But before you do that, you want to put the ENT back on the beginning of it and look up entstehen. So if you look up entstehen, you will notice that it says here it's an irregular verb, which is why it's taken the form that it has. And it says here that the auxiliary for this verb is sein. And so you may recall, if you have used April Wilson's textbook, you'll find this in chapter 14 where she talks about tenses and in particular how to construct a perfect tense in German. You need an auxiliary verb, and often, usually, the auxiliary for a perfect tense is haben, just like it is in English we use have. I have seen, they have completed, or something like that. So you would use haben plus a participle, just like English. But some verbs in German actually take sein as the auxiliary for constructing the perfect tense. And so this is one of those. And so you can see that in the dictionary entry. That's what the little s means. The auxiliary is sein. And so that's why you have this over here, war, which is the past tense of sein. And so that's why I translated it with a past perfect where I said had arisen. If it was a present tense sein verb there, then you would have to say has arisen as opposed to had arisen. So you can still have past perfect or present perfect. Either way, it's going to be a sein verb, and that's what's happened there. So the situation which had arisen through the baptismal preaching, through John's preaching. The other verb I want to look at here is ergab, and I want to look at this because it's kind of a similar situation. You have to do some work on that to figure out what to actually look up, and so you might want to just again cut off this little prefix part of the lexical formation of this particular verb and recognize that gab is the past tense of geben, and look up ergeben, and so that's what you're going to look up. And when you look up ergeben, you will notice that this one is from Collins Dictionary Online, although you know what, you might want to see Cassell's as well because it'll look more like you might be used to seeing in your written dictionary, but this is just easier to look at on the screen. You'll notice that you have a transitive verb entry and a reflexive verb entry, and that's important because this sich here means that this is a reflexive verb. And in this case, as is the case actually with many English verbs, which can be used reflexively, although we don't mark the reflexive in English oftentimes, it's just kind of baked into the contextual meaning. As in English, you can use the same word in two different ways, one which is a bit more reflexive and one which is more transitive. And so it's the same here. You can basically use the same translation, actually, yield or yield. And so you can think in English how the word yield can mean something like to yield a crop, right? A field can yield a good crop, which is transitive, or you can yield to someone on the road, which would be more reflexive, although we don't mark it that way in English. And anyway, so the point being, in German, you want to make sure that you're actually looking for the reflexive verb entry. And you can see in the Cassels here, let me just get rid of some of these ugly marks. There's got to be a better way to do this, but if you know one, let me know. So here when we look up ergeben, you'll see here irregular verb, which is why it became ergab in the past tense. VT is verb transitive, and here in the second entry you see verb reflexive, and so that tells you you have sort of two different things. In this case, you wouldn't get thrown off too badly by picking the wrong sense if you missed that it was reflexive, but in some cases the reflexive verb just means something utterly different, almost, from the transitive form of the same verb. And so you do want to make sure that you're catching that. And so in this case, I think I translated it as something like this already had arisen or had presented itself, I think I said, but you could even say had arisen in the sense of just coming to light or something like that. But anyway, so I hope you found that helpful. I think it's important to keep in mind how to look up these things in a dictionary and to really be paying attention to exactly the sense of the verb, because I mean you can just see with a dictionary entry like this, just like how many different things you have to pick from, and so you really got to get used to looking at what is it that I'm actually paying attention to here. You can see if it's used adjectively, which would be the case if it was a participle or something like that. Here you can see verbs as transitive or reflexive. So you just want to make sure that you're getting to the right part of your dictionary entry. So I hope you found that helpful. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you back here tomorrow.